Yo, what's going on guys, it's Cynical and welcome back to another video. Today for you guys, I wanted to talk about Square Enix's current lineup, talking about all the games that are currently in development over at Square Enix, or at least the big ones, the notable ones, and talk about why this is probably the biggest and best Square Enix lineup we've had maybe ever, or at least for like some time. I think this is a really good lineup. I think there is a lot here that caters towards all corners of the Square Enix fanbase, whether or not you're into Kingdom Hearts, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, or, you know, there are other IPs and lesser known sort of niche titles. I think there's a bit of something out there for everyone that is currently in development. When we're looking towards game releases from Square for this year, there isn't anything overly too exciting. I think the most exciting out there would probably have to be FORSPOKEN. I am looking forward to that, but for the most part, I think 2022 is a bit of a quiet year for Square, a little bit of an in-between one. But over the next few years, definitely the releases for Square Enix should be ramping up. First things first, let's start off with Kingdom Hearts 4. Let's just get this out of the way. Automatically, you guys know that this is probably the most exciting game that is currently in development from the company, for at least myself, and probably most of you guys who are watching this video. I don't really need to spend too much time talking about this, but Kingdom Hearts 4 didn't really think we'd be sort of talking about this, but oddly enough, at the same time, I kind of thought we'd be talking about this right now. Like, it's weird. I don't know. It's just that weird thing to think that Kingdom Hearts 3 ended up releasing only 3 years back in 2019. And I think the reason why it is weird is because it took us such a long time to get to Kingdom Hearts 3, and especially that wait from 2013 through to 2019 was strenuous. It was dragged out, it was long, it was certainly a botched development cycle. From, you know, reveal to release, there were a lot of issues that Square Enix faced with Kingdom Hearts 3's development. And so it feels just very weird, very unusual to now be seen in talking about Kingdom Hearts 4. But I think for the future of Kingdom Hearts, I don't think we should expect these really long and dragged out development times. Of course, we've talked about this, but now that, you know, HD assets for the Kingdom Hearts franchise have already been developed through the Unreal Engine, and that Square Enix now have expertise with the engine, looking at Kingdom Hearts game releases, they certainly shouldn't take that long. So Kingdom Hearts 4, I simply can't wait. I'm looking forward to seeing the new direction in which they're going with Kingdom Hearts 4, you know, this whole photorealistic type looking direction, and the fact that the game, from the story standpoint, is taking place in a new reality. It means that creative freedom has times by infinite. Square Enix can really go balls to the walls with this game and introduce concepts, gameplay mechanics, and all sorts of things that previously maybe wouldn't have worked with the Kingdom Hearts title, but now, thanks to Quadratum and Unreality, can work. I think Kingdom Hearts 4 is going to be a true breath of fresh air, and especially through, you know, Kingdom Hearts 3, there were certainly a lot of opinions given towards KH3. There were things there that I think shouldn't return for the future of the game. So it'll be interesting to see Square Enix taking in feedback from KH3 and how they kind of apply that to Kingdom Hearts 4 and the future. But certainly looking forward to receiving this over the next sort of coming years. Hopefully, fingers crossed, 2024 is what we'll be looking at. Now, there's also another Kingdom Hearts game that is currently in development as of right now, and that is Kingdom Hearts Missing Link. Now, I'm not going to sit here and list through all of the different mobile phone titles that are currently in development from Square Enix, but I felt like it's worth mentioning Missing Link. I'm excited for this, not due to the gameplay side of things, but more so the story, and I think that's what is so exciting when we're looking towards a new Kingdom Hearts game, is how this will kind of add on to the story. This is obviously a prequel, so it's attaching on to the origin saga, the key saga of Kingdom Hearts, to fill in the missing gaps. I'm looking forward to this for the story aspect. What is cool to know, though, is Kingdom Hearts Missing Link is going to obviously be using traditional Kingdom Hearts gameplay, incorporating in that whole Pokemon Go type concept. So interesting there. I never really got into that whole type of AR sort of game that became so big through Pokemon Go, but a Kingdom Hearts take on it might be cool. I'm just looking forward to the story side of things. Obviously, the game is due to go into a beta testing phase later on this year in specific countries, so another thing to look forward to when it comes to Kingdom Hearts for at least this year, which is cool. And obviously also Dark Road, the finale comes out this year, so that's also to look forward to. Final Fantasy 16, this is absolutely massive. With the release date of summer 2023, we recently found out, obviously with that recent gameplay trailer, yeah, this game is looking absolutely spicy. The next big major mainline Final Fantasy game. And this has actually been helmed by Yoshida, the dude that is responsible for Final Fantasy XIV, and even a lot of the Final Fantasy XIV staff are working on this game as well. So that's really good to know, as Final Fantasy XIV is held high up to such a high regard. Also, Endwalker being one of Square Enix's best reviewed games of like all time. There is high expectations when it comes to Final Fantasy 16, and after the unfortunate reception, I would say, for Final Fantasy 15, while personally I enjoyed it, and I think most people enjoy it, nowadays, there was a lot of initial disappointment, and obviously Final Fantasy 15 started off as something else versus 13. It had a completely different idea in mind, and that was unfortunately switched as Tetsuya Nomura was kicked off being director and Hajime Tabata stepped in. Again, it's not to say 15 was bad, but I know that a lot of people disregard the game, so I'm hoping for, I guess, better reception this time around for Final Fantasy 16. It really is going to be a breath of fresh air, I think, for the mainline Final Fantasy games. The gameplay is looking absolutely spicy. The return to high fantasy is something that Final Fantasy fans have wanted for a long time now. The overall tone of the game seems a lot darker. I think that Final Fantasy 16 has the potential to be the best Final Fantasy game we have received in quite some time, not including Final Fantasy 14, but more so in terms of like a traditional Final Fantasy setup for a mainline title. Yeah, this has the potential to be the biggest and best, so I cannot wait to see this next year. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 is currently in development, as confirmed by Tetsuya Nomura last year. Final Fantasy VII Remake was probably the most enjoyable Final Fantasy experience I've ever had. It simply put, it was just incredible. I'm a person that really struggles with turn-based games, so to see Final Fantasy going in that direction of being more real-time and action-orientated, it's a lot more welcoming for myself. I love action RPGs, and so to finally start seeing Final Fantasy games taking on that genre is really cool. There was a great amalgamation, though, of classic Final Fantasy infused into the action RPG sense of 7 Remake, and I think the gameplay that was present in 7 Remake, I hope they decide to use for future Final Fantasy games. It looks like Final Fantasy 16 is going to be more in line with traditional action games, so something like Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, or Kingdom Hearts, but I would definitely like to see more of what was found in Final Fantasy VII Remake used for other Final Fantasy games. I really do believe that the 7 Remake is one of Square Enix's best games and greatest experiences I've played from Square Enix, so I'm excited to see what they learned from the first game and how that is applied to Part 2. Also as well, where the story is up to with Part 2, now that we've left Midgar, this is kind of like the open world segment where the party is now going off into the actual world and not everything is taking place in Midgar. So it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt that into a current version, modern version of Final Fantasy VII. Is this going to be an open world setup? What's it going to sort of be like? But I'm interested to see more of what they do with the remake, and Part 2 currently in development. While we're on the topic of Final Fantasy VII, one more mobile phone title I'll mention that is currently in development from Square Enix that is due to release this year is Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. We should be hearing more about this game sometime soon, but yes, I know it is a mobile phone title, but I am looking forward to this. It is the complete Final Fantasy VII experience that also includes the compilation titles as well. So Before Crisis, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus, as well as Advent Children will be infused into this on top of the traditional Final Fantasy VII experience. It's going back to that turn-based system, so the ATB system, so it is turn-based, but will also apply to the other areas of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, which I think is really cool. It's the first time ever we've had all of Final Fantasy VII kind of in one place. It's going to be free to play, which is cool. There is going to be microtransactions attached to this, though, of course. There will be loot boxes and all of that nonsense. But through and through, I'm looking forward to this because it's using the chibi versions of Final Fantasy VII characters, infusing that, but then in with also the 7 remake models and sort of animations and effects and stuff. So it looks really cool. That is currently in development, due to come out sometime this year. Forspoken is something that I definitely do have my eye on ever since it was first unveiled during the PlayStation 5 showcase back in 2020. This has intrigued me. This is coming from Luminos Studios, which is the team that was responsible for Final Fantasy 15. I know that a lot of people, when they first found out about this, kind of just sort of turned their nose down at Forspoken, and I don't think that's fair. I think that people really do need to try give this a go, give it a chance. I have hope. It's hard though at the same time to have hope, just because when it comes to new IPs in Square Enix, most of the time they don't work out. They've got a really bad track record when it comes to brand new IPs. Forspoken though looks like it's hitting a different quality level in comparison to those other IPs. I feel like Square Enix also themselves don't have a lot of faith in creating new IPs, so the budget that's automatically applied to new IPs is very low. The budget here for Forspoken looks the highest for a new IP that Square Enix has really ever applied to a new IP, so that's really good, and it looks like a decent amount of time has been applied to this game. We've already seen a decent amount of footage of this game throughout this year. Game Informer had an exclusive footage drop, and a lot of it throughout early this year, showing us, you know, the different mechanics of the game between traversal, the world itself, combat, and really giving us a good idea as to what to expect. It's a big open world game. Traversal itself looks really fun. Frey can perform all sorts of crazy parkour moves and sort of traverse the environments at an absolutely crazy speed. So that in itself looks like a lot of fun. Combat, it's all spell driven, and you're going to be able to mix and match different spells. So it is all sort of ranged type combat, and visually the game looks really impressive. So I'm excited for this. I do have hope, and it is due to come out this year, so this will be Square Enix's biggest release for 2022. Dragon Quest XII, that was announced last year. While I haven't actually personally experienced any Dragon Quests, and I do actually own 11, which I really do want to give a go at some point, I know a lot of people are excited for this. We don't really have any idea as to when this is going to be coming out, but it is currently in the pipeline. The game pretty much is still in like early stages of development. The reason why I haven't give Dragon Quest a go, which is kind of strange considering that it is Square Enix's other major IP next to Final Fantasy, is probably because, again, like I struggle with turn-based, so a game like that struggles to hold my attention. But knowing how much of an absolute avid fanbase Dragon Quest has, I will do my best to try give Dragon Quest a go before 12 comes out. But I know that's another major game from Square Enix that is currently in development. Star Ocean: The Divine Force. So this was revealed last year, currently is in development. There might be a chance the game could come out this year. Who knows, with Summer Game Fest again coming out at the end of this week, it might end up receiving a release date. But I know a lot of people were taken by surprise when seeing this, only because with the previous release, Integrity and Faithlessness, this game right here didn't do too well. Now, again, in similar fashion to Dragon Quest, I haven't experienced the Star Ocean, and I really want to because this is actually an action RPG. However, I may have picked up probably what is considered the worst entry in the series, so that's a little bit unfortunate. I kind of don't want my first experience with Star Ocean to be the absolute worst entry, but because it was so bad, I think a lot of people were expecting maybe that Star Ocean would now go into obscurity and that it would lie just completely dormant. So I know that a lot of people were surprised with seeing the Divine Force, and just from the gameplay trailer, it looks really good. It's a game series that I really want to throw myself into, as it is one of Square Enix's long-time running series. For the past about 25 years now, they've had the Star Ocean IP. So it is one of the OG Square Enix games. I really do hope that Divine Force sort of brings Star Ocean back into relevancy and sort of rekindles the name that Star Ocean once had throughout that PlayStation 2 era. The Valkyrie series is another one of Square Enix's franchise that has been running for quite some time, since 1999. You might know this as the Valkyrie Profile games, and these are turn-based games. There was a new one that was revealed this year known as Valkyrie Elysium, which is actually an action RPG. Now, judging by the trailer that we have for the game so far, I'm not going to say that it's something absolutely groundbreaking or amazing, but for Valkyrie fans, considering that this is a long-time series of Square Enix, I know they're going to be absolutely rejoicing over the fact that a new game is on its way. I think the last game to release was back in 2019 worldwide and 2016 in Japan, and then previous to that, it was 2009. So the Valkyrie series hasn't really seen overly too many releases over the course of time. So I can imagine for the fan base, when they saw Elysium, they were probably jumping for joy, though this is an action RPG, and so that automatically gauges my interest. The trailer itself, though, from what we've seen, doesn't look like anything totally groundbreaking, in all honesty. It certainly, though, does give me some Nier-type vibes, so this is why I am interested in it. I don't think it's going to be a massive hit for Square Enix, just from what we're seeing so far, but considering that this is part of a long time running series, it is something to look forward to for the fans of the Valkyrie Profile franchise. Not too long ago, it was also announced that Just Cause is getting a new installment, Just Cause 5. I don't think Just Cause is incredible by any means, but it's one of those really fun sandbox type games that you just have an absolute blast mucking around in. And apparently, due to the financial report from Square Enix not too long ago, it was announced that the 5th Just Cause is currently in development. You guys may have caught the news that Square Enix ended up handing over most of their Western IPs over to the Embracer Group, which is part of THQ, previously known as. So they now have most of the IPs, but one of the ones that they did end up keeping a hold of was the Just Cause IP. So that is still Square Enix's, and the 5th one is currently in development. And I thought it's probably also worth mentioning, while this is not confirmed, the Final Fantasy IX remake. I don't know how Square Enix are able to juggle around so many different Final Fantasy projects with all of their mobile Final Fantasy games, and then Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 14, as well as 7 Remake Part 2. But if we look at the NVIDIA Games List leak, all of those games that are on that list have turned out to be very real games that are in fact in development. And at this point, when anyone talks about this list, you pretty much consider what is on there to be 100% true, and the Final Fantasy IX remake is something that is a part of that list. Which probably means that, yeah, while the game might not be in full-blown development, at least early production of Final Fantasy IX remake is likely to be happening at Square Enix as of right now. From what I can understand in the Final Fantasy community, when it comes down to a Final Fantasy game that needs to be remade, Final Fantasy IX is generally the most popular pick. Final Fantasy VII, for all of this time leading up to before the announcement of the remake, was probably the top candidate, but now that that's actually a reality, I think most people want to see 9 being remade, so that's good news for people that want that. If they kind of make it in similar fashion to that of the 7 remake, it's definitely going to pique my interest. Though because we have a Final Fantasy remake game that is so different in its gameplay compared to its very original version, maybe it would be kind of cool for the 9 remake to remain true to that turn-based gameplay that was already present in the original version. So who knows? One way or another, though, I would say the Final Fantasy IX remake is a very real thing. So just from that list alone, those are the main big boy games coming from Square Enix in the next few years. And I honestly do believe this is probably the most exciting lineup we've had from Square Enix in a very, very long time. This won't be all of the cool stuff coming from Square. I also feel like there's probably something going on with Nier as well. The next big major entry with Nier. The biggest one we've had, obviously, is Nier Automata back in 2017. Last year, of course, we had a slight remakey remaster type deal with Nier Replicant, which was cool to see. But there's likely to be also another major Nier game in development as well. Summer Games Fest is not too far away, so likely there will be some new Square Enix announcements there, and later on throughout this year, other games in development that we currently don't know about. But from just that list alone, I think there's enough variety in Square Enix's lineup as of right now to satisfy and appeal to all kinds of Square Enix fanboys alike. But however, guys, let me know your thoughts and opinions towards Square Enix's current lineup. What are you most looking forward to? I would love to know. However, guys, I'm Cynical. Hopefully having a good one, and I'll catch you guys real soon. Peace.